Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting of Monday, November 28th, 2022. First item of business is our land acknowledgement, and the town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, region number 3. Item 1.2, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared, thank you. Moving on to item 2.1, acceptance of the agenda for our regular council meeting, November 28th, 2022. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, could I get someone that make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting agenda for November 28, 2022 as presented? Deputy Mayor Pickering, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 3.1, adoption of the previous minutes from our regular council meeting of November 14th, 2022. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I get someone to adopt the regular council meeting minutes from November 14th, 2022 as presented? Councilor Beekman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Under item 3.2, adoption of the previous minutes, we have the budget meeting minutes from November 15th, meeting 1 of 4. Were there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, can I get someone to pass the minutes? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.3, special council budget meeting minutes, meeting 2 of 4 from November 22nd, 2022. Are there any error or omissions in those minutes? See none, I'll get someone to make a motion to adopt those. Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 6.1, public hearing regarding land use bylaw text amendment, bylaw 859-P-11-22. Is there anyone in the room today that's here for that agenda item 6.1? This land use bylaw text amendment 859-P-11-22 is regarding solar collectors or solar panels. The purpose of this hearing is to receive public input on the proposed bylaw 859-P-11-22, and we have Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Investment, presenting. Cameron, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. We have no one present here from the public to speak to the matter, and we received no correspondence from the public with respect to this issue. As council likely recalls, the bylaw provides for basically a tweaking of the existing land use bylaw to provide for some capacity to regulate larger scale solar collector installations within the community, particularly within our non-residential areas. This is a fairly administrative topic. So it's not necessarily surprising that it didn't have a significant amount of public interest. I think at this point I would simply allow for council to, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move forward.
Any questions? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through to Cam, if I may, just the two things that kind of tweaked my mind in reading it. I know we're going into through this public hearing, I wanted to ask you about the square footage of a commercial versus residential. My first question. So you have 10% for residential and yet 300 square feet for commercial for solar. So 10% of the property on a residential would average be, could you?
Yeah, thank you. It wouldn't be significant. And with residential properties, there's also, they tend to run into the general site coverage requirements. So for example, in an R1A district, we might have I believe it's a 45% lot coverage maximum, which would include 10% being, no more than 10% being accessory structures. And so even if you have, say, a 7,000 square foot lot in a residential zoning, only 3,500 of that would potentially be covered in any type of building or structure. So there are a lot of regulations there in place. So we don't really anticipate any concerns on the residential side. Typically, in fact, every residential application I've seen has been mounted insulation, which really doesn't cause any significant concerns. What we're really more concerned about is standalone solar structures that might be relatively almost solar farm within an urban sized use. That's what we're trying to make sure that we have the ability to do.
Could I respond, Mayor? So 10% of what I was gathering from this is 10% of 7,000 square feet, for example, would be 700 square feet.
Potentially, but there are, when you add up the other structures on the lot, it's very unlikely that anyone would be able to accommodate 700 square feet for.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand, so that it gives clarity to that. The second point I'd like to make is with regards to the land use bylaw and whether there would be an opportunity to split up the definitions of freestanding versus roof mount, for example, or building mount, if there would be a possibility of separating those distinctions to give more clarity.
Absolutely. So our, just provide a general philosophy here. Our philosophy here was to approach the issue noting that we needed to make some regulatory change in relatively short order to address potential serious concern with the lack of regulation for those commercial type installations. There is room for improvement in terms of the broader scale of solar panel regulation within town, but that would require the kind of resources and time that simply wasn't available to the department. So if that's something that we want to engage in a more comprehensive, as part of a more comprehensive land use bylaw review, I think it would be perfectly reasonable to do so.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, Cam, and I look forward to seeing this go through. And then if we need to define it a little better, we could do that at a later time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And Cameron, how was this advertised?
I don't recall. So it would have been posted on our website, and I believe we had an ad in the Sunny South.
Any other questions for Cameron? And I wrote it down, but I forgot to let our municipal clerk know I called the public hearing to order at 5:03 p.m. You have sufficient information to come up with a motion after this? I'll declare the public hearing closed at 5:09 p.m. Moving on to item 7.1, we're going to jump 6.2 that takes place at 5:30. So item 7.1, Cameron can stay where he's at. We're going to be discussing the land use text amendment bylaw again, 859-P-11-22 regarding second and third reading. So if there is no any more questions, I'm looking for someone to sponsor second reading of land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22 as presented. Someone care to sponsor that? Councillor Beekman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I'm looking for someone to sponsor third and final reading of the land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22. Deputy Mayor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to new business, item 8.1, request for council support regarding our ACP grant application for Lethbridge County / Coaldale Regional Water Supply Study. And we have our Manager of Infrastructure, Dustin Yankee, presenting. Dustin, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So the purpose of this report is to get Council to support a motion for a resolution of support for a grant application for a regional water study under the Alberta Community Partnership Program. So this program provides up to $200,000 in funding and would cover 100% of the proposed project expenses. Within the application, what we're looking at doing is partnering with Lethbridge County and looking at regionally the viability of a bypass line that would go around Coaldale. This would benefit the town by taking McCain's water distribution or their demand off of our distribution system, as well as it would benefit the county by providing additional development opportunities east of town. So the study would look at the viability of the project, where the bypass line could go, some high-level project costs, as well as details into the town's reservoir itself, particularly the location of it, in conjunction with a bypass line or without a bypass line. So regardless of the regionalization with the county and looking at the bypass line, there's still tangible benefits for the town within this study. So from administration's perspective, we're basically capitalizing on grant dollars that we're going to be spending at a later date anyways. So within that, we're just looking for a resolution of support from council. Open up the floor if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Dustin? Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. So I noticed we have two of these on our agenda. Is one priority over the other one, or should we be putting them both through at the same time?
So the one I just spoke to is specifically being applied under our name and county of Lethbridge County. The other one that I'm about to talk about is an application that's being made by the MD of Tabor. So I guess to go into that one a bit to give you some, shed some light on that. Basically, from the government's perspective, they're going to see two applications from neighboring communities. So recommendation from our consultant, being MPE, they've dealt with a lot of these projects and grant applications in the past. So it was their recommendation that we support one another. Basically, I think regardless of the outcome of both studies, there's still information that should be looked at. So it's not wasted work per se. It's more or less giving, support to their application so it doesn't look like we're competing against one another.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Dustin. So with this study, that'll give us the information we need on how big our reservoir is going to have to be built. With taking McCain's off, are we going to have all this information from this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Dustin? Seeing none, can I get someone to sponsor that council directs administration to partner with Lethbridge County to submit a funding application under the Alberta Community Partnership Program to complete a Lethbridge County / Coaldale Regional Water Supply Study? Councillor Reese. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8.2, Request for council support ACP grant application for MD of Tabor, and our manager of infrastructure, Dustin Yankee, will be presenting on that as well.
So as I guess just mentioned, the intent with this resolution is to simply paint the picture for the province that we're not competing with the MD. They are two separate projects. So again, we're just looking for council support through a resolution. So again, if there's any questions, feel free to.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you. I've heard in conversation over the last week that this regional water project could be from Lethbridge to Medicine Hat. Is this just political rumor, or have you heard anything about that in the engineering field?
Personally, I haven't heard anything past Tabor. Couldn't comment further on that.
Councillor Chapman.
Mayor, just to affirm Councillor Avery's question, I have heard that ideally the same thing at the political level, which seems to be a lot more robust than what we're hearing from this resolution. And second to that, that potable water is becoming a new topic as well for the whole area between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat.
Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, our motion option that council pass a resolution of support for the MD of Tabor's application under the Alberta Community Partnership or ACP program for the Highway 3 Corridor Regional Water Supply Study project involving the municipalities of Tabor, Lethbridge County, and Coaldale. Councillor Chapman makes a motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll jump ahead to departmental reports. Item agenda 9.1, the Coaldale and District Emergency Services Q3 report. Are you going to be doing that, Mark?
I can certainly do my portion of it.
Okay, if you want to come and do your portion, please. So we have our manager of community policing, Mark Anderson, is going to be presenting on his portion.
If we can, if you could advance forward to. Mayor and Council, thank you very much. I'm here to report on our results from our third quarter 2022. The first, our call type volume or call types for the third quarter, very similar this year to what they were last year, in that unsightly properties form the largest volume of calls that we undertake during the spring and summer months and into early fall. In this particular, it's better than a full 25% of our work is just on unsightly properties. We do some work with land use development or land use bylaw, and this year again we had a significant number of dog control events. And one more. So during our third quarter for unsightly properties, of the 26 complaints that I mentioned, one in particular involves 16 lots owned by a single corporate entity. We have reached out to that corporation now directly to see if we can't find a better way to address that next year, so that we're not having to spend so much time dealing with those lots on an individual basis. So for next year, we're trying to work on a plan with them to improve that condition. Also, for dog complaints this year, as everyone's aware, we are looking after all of our own dog complaints this year. We're no longer contracted out. And during the third quarter, we had 12 dog complaints, mostly dealing with barking dogs, some dogs at large, and during Q3 we had one dog attack complaint. That particular dog attack complaint did not result in any charges, as our complainant in that instance would not sign a complaint, nor did they wish to proceed with any kind of charges on that matter. Most of our calls, or about 25% of our calls, are still coming in via the phone. A significant number come in also as officer observed complaints, and there's from our fellows out driving around in the community. And we get some via email and other methods as well. People walking in at the fire hall or stopping us on the street. Of the call volumes that we were doing that were initiated by our officers, business license checks remained a fairly significant portion of officer-generated activity in the third quarter. And after that was followed by community relations, traffic offenses, and assisting other agencies. During the third quarter, we conducted a strategic traffic enforcement program, primarily on 20th Street. It was a targeted enforcement program we did in conjunction with our traffic calming committee. We deployed our traditional enforcement as well as photo enforcement on 20th Street a significant amount of time during the months of June, July, and August. And as a result, you'll see quite a few of our traffic violations during that period are on 20th Street, and then spaced out pretty well evenly across the rest of the town. So again, 20th Street for traditional enforcement was the number one place that we were deployed, followed by a number of other locations around town. And our map just illustrates where, just from a looking point of view, you can have a good idea where our guys are going and where the enforcement is taking place in town. Again, the vast majority of it is centered around 20th Street. For traditional enforcement, we've been trying to address a number of community concerns that we've had with speed as well as noise. And it seems to have been having some positive effect on that, and getting some feedback from residents that they've noticed a decrease in speed and the noise coming off of trucks with Jake brakes. Automated traffic enforcement, again, photo radar for those who are not familiar with the new modern term that they've given to it. During the third quarter, we used photo radar at 10 separate locations. There's 1,845 tickets issued from photo enforcement, and the average speed on those tickets was 17 kilometers, in excess of the speed limit for the areas where it was enforced. There are average penalties there, and again, there's total expected revenue would actually be what the total value of all the tickets issued was, provided, of course, everybody pays them and there's no non-guilties. And again, just these are actually the specific sites that we were at. Highway 3 is always a significant player in photo enforcement, and that followed by, again, 20th Street, and then our playground zones followed in as the third top locations for photo enforcement. And I invite questions.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. I asked this during budget meeting last week, and I'll ask again because there's probably more people streaming tonight. And it's about the scope that our municipal enforcement officers do, and what do we have to do as council, as governance, to make sure that you and your staff are working to their full scope, legislated provincially, without any barricades, because it should not be up to the RCMP to say what you guys are going to do. It should be up to us as council. So we need to make sure we're supporting you guys and getting the right policies in place for that.
Thank you, Councilor Avery. The best thing that council can do to assist us is working towards obtaining enhanced authorities for the community peace officers. There is a process in place for that. And that process does involve the support of the RCMP or the policing service of jurisdiction. If I can use Lethbridge, City of Lethbridge as an example, their police service there supported enhanced authorities for their community peace officers, and they along with council were the people who led the charge on that, and were then given wider range of authorities. It really is done as a partnership. That way we get the best out of both services.
Thanks. One follow-up then. And so I believe the RCMP need to remember that they are our police force, and we pay for that police force. So we still should be able to decide the governance model, what they're going to do, and what you guys are going to do. So I believe we need to work with the RCMP to make sure that they do support this venture, so it's an easier transition for you guys.
Absolutely.
Any further questions, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mark, for your portion of this presentation. I really been interested in all the numbers here, and it's really proving that there's your productivity is way up. Two questions. One with regards to business license checks. If this is becoming a big portion of your officer-generated productivity, are there any tools in place or any messaging that you could incorporate that would ensure that businesses doing business in town that are from outside of Coaldale are aware that there's a business license requirements to work here?
There are a number of ideas that we're discussing right now with our our director of economic development, as to providing information in packages when people are obtaining building permits and development permits to help us with that, so that they know their subtrades have to be licensed when they come here. That's one of the initiatives. We're also talking about when we're sending out notifications for business license renewals, that more information is included in that.
Just a follow-up question, if I may, with regards to social media. Have you found social media to be effective in getting messaging out or responding to issues that are hot button items?
In regards to business licensing, or
No,
any issue?
in any other form.
We've actually our work with dog control issues in the Animal Welfare Committee has been very successful. We're getting lots of feedback on our survey, and we're using that information now and developing some go-forward plans for that part of our unit.
Any further questions for Mark? I have one regarding Jake breaks. Can you explain how the enforcement works on that?
Jake breaks enforcement is something that you have to find committing, or you have to have a complainant who'd be willing to go to court. So what we've done is we've had our guys deploy out in the field during the earlier morning hours, particularly with photo enforcement and traditional enforcement along the south end and north end of 845. You don't typically get any enforcement action because they see you sitting there and they don't use their Jake brakes. So you're obtaining the same result without having to actually issue the tickets. The increased presence really has made a difference in it, as well as the signs that our operations department has placed at the north and south entrance has made a big difference.
So if you have your photo radar van sitting there, can they report to you if somebody is using their Jake brakes coming into town?
A complainant could report it to the photo radar operator, yes. The photo radar operator does not have the authority to stop somebody and issue them a ticket.
No, but can they be the witness? So if they see, or I should say hear, can they notify somebody to come and stop that semi?
Absolutely.
because I'll get quite a few complaints on the 20th, like people coming in from the south,
Yeah.
going through Cottonwood, so. Okay, and then there might be a couple more questions that come up if you could just stay. Is Kevin going to be coming later, do you know?
After the public hearing.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to do the public hearing, and then there may be a couple more questions if you have time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So at 5:30 p.m., I'm going to call a public hearing to order regarding agenda item 6.2, the land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22 regarding the rezoning from urban reserve to direct control. For everyone that's here in the gallery this evening, my name is Mayor Jack Van Rijn, and I will be chairing this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through myself. Addressed to the chair will be Mayor Van Rijn. The purpose of the public hearing is to consider the application to redesignate the lands legally described as Plan 731049, Block 3, Lot 4, from urban reserve to direct control, and subsequently to consider the application for development of an office, greenhouse, and community garden. The public hearing procedures are as follows. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing, and it will not be a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered, and that by pre-registering is that sign-in sheet that Cameron's been passing around, will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself as the chair. Each presenter must state his or her full name, their address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support of the application or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 5-minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. And the last item, if any new presentation materials are provided that you bring up this evening, you may be required to email a copy to our municipal court. At this time, I'll ask our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, to introduce the subject matter of this public hearing.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Van Rijn. Thank you, everyone, for attending this evening. So, as Mayor Van Rijn indicated, what we're here to discuss at the public hearing this evening is really two issues within a single public hearing, though those issues are very closely related. The first is a bylaw, which is Bylaw 858-P-10-22, which is for the redesignation of this particular piece of property from its existing urban reserve zoning to a proposed direct control zoning. And subsequent to that, to consider a development permit application before council for the installation of an office on the site, as well as a greenhouse and a proposed community garden within the space. So the land in question, legally described as 731049, Block 3, Lot 4, and the applicant is Mr. Ryan Casco, who's here with us this evening. So the property in question is a residential acreage located within the town, north of Highway 3 and along 18th Avenue. And it has been purchased by Mr. Casco with the intention of redeveloping the site to accommodate the administrative side of his business, which is the Casco cattle, as well as to provide for a small greenhouse space attached to that office, and to provide for a garden for community use towards the front of the property. First reading of the bylaw for rezoning was considered at the October 24th, 2022 regular meeting of council. And after that was provided, we received a more detailed development permit application. And as such, that provided us with the opportunity to consider both matters at the same time. Administratively, that's something that we generally prefer, because It eliminates the sort of the technical nature of what's an appropriate conversation for rezoning and what's an appropriate conversation for development, and just lays the entire matter on the table for council and before the public. And it's a little bit easier, I think, generally for everyone to understand the process. And that way we make sure that we have the ability to hear everyone's concerns at the right time before council has an opportunity to make a decision. The proposal, just to provide a high-level overview of the proposal. So if the proposal were to be considered, rezoning would need to be approved, and then if rezoning were to be approved, the proposal is shown here. So we've got 18th Avenue over to the side. The existing access is here, and that would provide for access to the property. We show an office building of approximately 5,500 square feet, as well as a greenhouse of 765 square feet, and a community garden space showing a significant number of plots for that type of use, as well as 21 parking stalls being shown within the application. The intention of the application being to leave the majority of the landscaping that exists in place, particularly with respect to most of the tree coverage. It also calls for some additional landscaping. There's some landscaping that's going to provide a stormwater management component, which is appreciated administratively. There's a storm pond that's shown here as well. And generally speaking, at a high level, the intention is to maintain as much of the existing character of the site as is reasonably possible. So with respect to the question of the rezoning, because that's really the first question before council, what we're talking about here is an existing zoning that's known as an urban reserve zoning. And urban reserve zoning is applied to properties when they're annexed into the town that had previously been governed by the county's land use bylaws. So these properties are now part of the town, and urban reserve zoning is basically almost what you might call a placeholder zoning, which is to say the urban reserve zoning acknowledges the fact that rezoning will occur at some point in the future on these properties once either a more comprehensive plan is in place or an application which meets council's needs or concerns is put in front of them. The reason that we have moved forward with this application as a direct control application rather than as a commercial application, I think is an important distinction. So when you look at what is being proposed here, there's really three uses. There's a community garden aspect, there's a greenhouse aspect, and there's an office aspect. Realistically, the community garden and the greenhouse functions are something that could be approved on the existing zoning. So it's really only the question of the office building that requires us to consider the application for rezoning. And typically, if someone were looking to develop an office type use, they would look for a commercial zoning. So either a commercial C1, which is our standard commercial zoning that you might see downtown, or a commercial C2 zoning, which is a highway commercial type zoning, so what you might see applied on the west end of town around McDonald's and things like that. What is proposed here is instead direct control, and that has a really important distinction. And so with this part of the community, we don't have high-level plans in place. We have the municipal development plan, which covers the entire town, and then the next step for a region would typically be, or for an area, would typically be to do what's known as an area structure plan. And an area structure plan is, again, something that's passed as a bylaw that provides for a general overview of how a larger block or region within a town will be developed. We don't have one of those in place for this part of the community yet. It is something, as you know, from the budget process that we're looking to develop for this part of the community in the spring. And so that's something that the town is looking to engage upon, to bring in consultants to start to develop this plan and to work closely with existing landowners and the broader community to determine a broader plan for how development in this part of the community is going to move forward. So to outline future zoning and future major transportation corridors and things like that. That's a process that typically takes upwards of a year. In the town of Coaldale, it can certainly take more, or a little bit less. So 6 months to a year is typically what we shoot for a process like that. And it's not something, as I said, it's not something that's in place yet. Without an area structure plan in place, administratively, when we look at an application like this, it doesn't mean that we won't consider rezoning. Not at all. There are all sorts of areas in town where an area structure plan is not in place. Rather, what we want to look at is to understand with rezoning how a proposed rezoning will impact the neighboring property owners' existing use of the property, as well as the foreseeable development of the broader area. And so, the difference between applying for, say, a commercial district for this lot and a direct control district for this lot is a very important distinction. So a commercial district, if it were to be considered for this lot, we would typically consider that application, and it is typical that the proponent would also provide for a proposal for what the development would ultimately be, something very similar to here. The difference is that when you apply a commercial district, even though the applicant has a very specific idea of what they're seeking, the reality is a commercial district allows for a broad variety of potential uses that down the line could be approved. So for example, even if we feel that an office building is appropriate within this area, if we applied the commercial district, a restaurant is a permitted use within a commercial district, a bank is a permitted use within a commercial district, a retail store is a permitted use. And so even though Mr. Casco has not provided any indication that he's looking to open a restaurant and or a bank, if that did arrive in front of administration and that zoning were provided that he could meet the requirements for parking and certain other aspects of the land use bylaw, that would be something that would be rather simply approved. What we're proposing here instead is direct control. And fundamentally what direct control does is it takes the ability to consider an application like this one out of the hands of administration or the Municipal Planning Commission and instead transfers that power to council. And so whenever any application, once a land is zoned direct control, and the way we've written the bylaw is that if an application comes for something that would fit the existing zoning, so for example, a small shed or something very, very minor, that could be dealt with at the administrative level. But fundamentally speaking, any application of any significance would require council's consideration. So council would be able to look at the application and say, how does this affect the long-term plans for the neighborhood, and also how does it affect the existing landowners? And so the reason we consider that is when we look at this particular application, we look at an office use within the broader context of commercial type uses is relatively low intensity. It doesn't generate the kind of traffic or noise or things like that that other commercial uses tend to generate. Office workers tend to come and go 1 or 2 times a day. They tend to work during the day, Monday to Friday, that sort of thing. Not to say that there isn't any impact, but there is relatively smaller impact compared to other types of commercial designations. So there's a comfort level associated with what's being proposed that fits in the commercial district that might be appropriate, given that we have other residential uses within the area, recognizing that we want to limit the ability to go beyond that without careful consideration with council and also careful consideration with the general public, which is to say more notifications, more public hearings, more opportunities for the folks in the area to have a say on any additional development that's going to occur within the area. Just have to gather myself. That was a lot of talking. So how things work with a development permit for the direct control district is that we receive an application, and in this case, the application, it is only the office use that really requires council's consideration at this point, because both the smaller greenhouse as well as the community garden fit within uses that could be approved under the existing zoning. And then that application is circulated internally to other departments for their feedback. So we'll circulate, we'll receive feedback from the infrastructure department, and we'll look at things from an engineering perspective. But we also circulate it externally, so we want to make sure that the general public has an opportunity to comment, neighboring landowners, that sort of thing. Once that's considered, we bring it forward to council at a public hearing. A public hearing is held, the issue is considered, and then following that, council has the ability to decide on the permit. When council decides on the permit itself looks very similar to a permit that's issued by our Municipal Planning Commission, which is to say council has the ability to attach conditions to that permit. And Conditions are something that are applied as a matter of course for most development permits, and that those conditions allow for the approval to be granted subject to ensuring that certain concerns or issues are remedied. So we have proposed, when we look at the development permit application, if council does want to consider it, we have a list of 16 conditions attached to that development permit. So we're looking at, for example, the requirement for a building permit, the requirement to call Alberta First Call. Not to go through all of the requirements in the list, but we want to make sure that we get good engineering drawings that speak to the ability to hook into municipal servicing, either existing municipal services or new municipal services that might come down the line. We want to make sure that we have appropriate deposits in place to ensure that landscaping that is promised does occur. We want to make sure that those plantings meet the town's guidelines with respect to that planning. One of the things we are looking at is with respect to the building itself, the application calls for existing office component of upwards of about 10 employees. If that number changes, we have right here what we're showing is 21 parking stalls. There are no in the land use bylaw requirements for parking stalls for something like a community garden. A community garden is not something that's explicitly discussed in the land use bylaw. So the technical requirement for this site, for this size of office building, is 11 parking stalls. We have substantially more than 11 parking stalls shown here. But we also want to make sure that there's something in place within that permit that shows that if we find additional parking is required, that the owner of the land will provide a plan that shows where additional parking on the lot can be accommodated, so that we don't create a parking issue. If the business were to expand, it might spill onto the adjacent road or anything like that. So we want to make sure that that issue is addressed. We really feel that that can confidently be done through those types of conditions. As far as stakeholder engagement goes, we did provide direct notification to the existing, to the neighboring landowners, many or most of whom are here. I did receive 3 calls on the issue, 2 from landowners who just wanted to check in on the ability to speak at the hearing this evening. So didn't provide for any statements for or against the application, and following a conversation with the Rosses, they did provide me with an email indicating their support generally for the application, which was provided after we had a chance to talk in a little more detail about what was being proposed. The Rosses are also here this evening too, so they'll have an opportunity to discuss that. Mr. Casco is here as the applicant, so he's certainly able to address any questions council or the public would have with respect to any of the details that haven't been provided as part of this report. So at this point, I would pass the baton back to council for questions or to move forward with the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Cameron. I'd like to invite Ryan to come up and sit beside Cameron there. And before we open it up for questions, I'll give Ryan an opportunity to add anything that he wants to Cameron's presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and good evening, council, guests. First off, I'd start by saying that our interests in this project are really for the good of Coaldale. I live in Lethbridge County, but I'm born and raised, went to school in Coaldale. My father went to school in Coaldale as well, and our kids. And I'm here with my wife Shannon. We think we've come up with an idea that would really be good for the community, and we're hoping that we can get your support to zone the property accordingly. Casco Cattle is a cattle feeding and farming business located just 2 miles north of Coaldale. We have 65 employees spread out in 3 locations, from Tabor to Raymond to Coaldale. And we are a growing business, and we wanted to find an office space that would assist us in our growth. We've been longtime supporters of the community here, involved in youth sports, the arts, and educational projects. And looking at the previous presentation, I understand that I've made some pretty good contributions to the automated vehicle enforcement program as well. And our largest contribution to date is for the Coaldale Rec Center, and we're really proud of that. And when we saw that there was a property quite close to that new rec center, and saw how beautiful it was, we thought that would be a great place for our office. Our purpose as a company is to grow food better and enrich the lives of our people. And as we can continue to grow, we wanted to build an office that would incorporate those values into our office. So we purchased this parcel because it is a beautiful spot. It would be a really nice place for our office staff to work. And I think it's something that we can showcase to our customers and our suppliers that visit as well. So as mentioned, we are looking to build a 5,500 square foot office building. We have 7 to 8 full-time people that work in the office every day. And occasionally we'll have up to about 10. We generally will have very few customers that visit us on our farm, but it's not uncommon to have 20 to 30 visitors per week that are suppliers and other people. But generally it's a low traffic coming into our office space. We do some farm tours occasionally, different school groups and government and industry people, and we thought this would be just a beautiful place to start a tour and end a tour. The thing that I think is maybe something we're most excited about is considering this to be the Casco Urban Farm. And I don't know if I've ever heard anyone else trying to do something like this before, but this is why I think it could be something special for Coaldale. We would like to have garden space available for the public so that local seniors or people that don't have garden space on the northwest side of Coaldale could access that easily. We'd love to have some honeybees and earthworms and just have a nice spot that we could grow food. I think that the proximity to the high school also lends itself to giving kids the opportunity to learn how to grow food themselves. I've seen it in other places where high school programs incorporate community garden, and the kids learn how to design a garden and grow the produce and then actually sell it too. So that's something that we'd like to be a part of. We want to showcase the importance of food production to young people and have them consider agriculture as a career, and I'm hoping that they'll come work for us after they have that opportunity. So just to wrap up, I think this is a special opportunity for Coaldale. It's not necessarily a good business decision for us to do this, but we think that it's a positive thing for our business to be a part of, and hopefully the council will agree that this would be a good fit for what you'd like to see. Thanks for considering our application. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to council for questions for either Cameron or Ryan. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ryan and Shannon, for your presentation this evening. My only question was regarding the community garden, and I think you've answered those questions in terms of how it would be available to the public, and if this was truly a real community service component.
Yeah, maybe just add a little bit more flavor to it. I've met with the Coaldale Community Garden Society. Good. And I think they're saying, why would you do this? It's, people are going to come in onto your property and steal vegetables, or trash them or whatever. But I think that the way this is situated is that it can be done properly, privately. We plan to have good security systems in place and discourage any vandalism, but we do want to make it available just like the community garden near the hub. Not something that we would charge for. We really want to just encourage people to learn how to grow food, and that's, we don't have any other intentions with it.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So Ryan, will the greenhouse be like year round, kind of like set up to run and grow stuff year round?
Well, yeah, in the greenhouse that's attached to our office is probably mainly for our office staff, just to have a nice place attached to our lunchroom.
Okay.
But yes, I would think we're going to be growing plants or maybe some vegetables.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and through to Cam. I have a question. I've heard a few things over the past weekend from actual residents that live in those acreages, and they've told me that they were told that in 20 years, that's all going to be commercial. So can you just please clarify for me?
So I don't know necessarily where the idea that it all would have been commercial would have come from, so I can't recall every conversation I've had. But generally speaking, the reality of the acreages is not that they're going to be commercial in any set amount of time. We have the need to provide a long-term plan for the area. And the long-term plan for the area will be in line with our existing town plan. So that's the document that outlines how the town grows generally. So the town plan, without question, calls for a certain level of density and urbanization. And one of the factors that affects the town's growth is the need to convert lots of this size to something more sort of urban in nature, if you will. Whether that is going to be single-family residential type lots, multifamily residential lots, commercial lots, all of that is what the area structure plan process will determine. I can fairly safely say industrial is off the table for this section, but really there's a broad range of potential uses in this area that are reasonable. I also want to be very, very clear that there's no triggering mechanism for acquiring any landowner to do that. So if an existing owner has an acreage in that parcel, they're certainly welcome to continue to have an acreage. It is simply that when it comes time for that to be developed at a more sort of urban level, that development is going to occur in such a way that it conforms with the rest of the area. And so the area structure plan will outline how that occurs. It will never at any point force anyone to do anything with their property. And to that effect, one of the lenses that we look at when we look at this type of application, when we consider what Mr. Casco's provided, is that at a high level, what's before council is a reasonable fit for a variety of surrounding land uses. So the question we ask ourselves from a planning perspective is, does this proposal work if in the long term it's determined that this area is commercial, and I believe that it does. And does it work if in the long term this area is of more of a residential character? And even with that, we have office type buildings in more residential areas relatively frequently. And so for that reason, we look at this application and say there's a broad range of potential urban style uses that might occur in these areas, whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. This is reasonable within the broader scope in terms of it won't get in the way of the eventual development of the area. So when we think about it from a planning perspective, we do think about, like I say, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. We're talking about, is it likely that these acreages are still going to be acreages 100 years from now when Coaldale is 60,000 people? And I realize it's difficult to sort of conceptualize Coaldale as 60,000 people, but it's entirely within the realm of possibility 100 years from now. These lots will be well within the boundaries of Coaldale. It's unlikely that they will continue to be acreages forever. And so we just want to make sure that we develop these lots over time, one at a time, in such a way that they don't get in the way of the future development of the other ones. Does that make sense? It was pretty random.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Cam. So the lot on the furthest east along that section, that is zoned commercial already?
No, that is also zoned direct control with an office use that has been approved. So that is the furthest To the east, it's the lot I refer to as the triangle.
And just, if I could get you, Cameron, to touch on one more time about the area structure plan that the town just passed a motion to fund to get done for the 70 acres by the school, including the area south of 18th. And if you could explain a little bit how that would benefit the landowners in the future.
Absolutely. So the town is going to be engaging in the area structure plan process, and we're going to be using our planning consultants to spearhead the project. And so that is ISL Land and Engineering Services, I think is the full title. And they've done a number of area structure plans for other developers in the community in the past. They're very familiar with our requirements. And what's going to happen is the town is going to be the principal applicant for that, which is to say that we are going to retain the engineer and we are going to pay the bill for the firm that is going to be doing the work. The plan will provide a broad overview of all the lots, including the lots south of 18th. And so when the plan is completed, those landowners will then benefit from having basically gone through the area structure plan process themselves, which is something that is required of them in order to further subdivide their lots, for example. But they won't be required to engage in that on their own. That's a very fairly expensive process for an individual landowner to undertake. Typically, those range from $50,000 to $100,000. We are going to include those lands as part of the process, and our consultants are going to begin by reaching out to those landowners and introducing themselves and making sure that they can participate in the process as it goes through. And again, and I can't stress this enough, regardless of what occurs within the planning process, if the plan, for example, determines that over time the lots are going to be divided into say residential R1A lots, similar to what you might see in Cottonwood or things like that. That doesn't trigger a requirement to do so. It doesn't force the hand of any owner. They're welcome to continue to live in their home as it is for as long as they want.
And as part of that process, there'll be open houses where people can have their input.
Yes, there's no question that we have, relative to some other communities, like a fairly rigorous public consultation process in terms of our expectations of developers, and we very much look forward to holding ourselves to the highest of those standards. It wouldn't be fitting for us to expect a private developer to do something that we're not prepared to do at the highest level. So we'll definitely be, in addition to working directly with the landowners, there will be opportunities for public engagement for the entire community.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through Cam, this one actually might go to Caitlin too. When this area here was annexed into the town of Coaldale, there were still grandfathered county taxes, correct?
Correct.
Does that tax structure still apply to this lot, or does that roll into town of Coaldale tax structure?
My understanding, Kaylin can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the triggering mechanism for conversion from the county's rate to the town's rate is subdivision or substantial development, which this would represent. So I believe this will trigger the town tax rate for this particular parcel. It won't affect any adjacent property.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'll open it up to the gallery, and just to go over one more time that if you want to speak, I'll get you to please stand, state your name and address, and if you're speaking in support or non-support of the application. Ryan, you may as well stay there because there are going to be questions for you too, and Cameron. So, Liz Allen, go ahead.
Well, I'm Liz Allen, and I live right along that parking lot that is going to be on Castle Road.
And Liz, we only have one microphone for our viewers at home, so if I could get you to use your outside voice, please.
So hi, Ryan. I met Ryan, and I thought what a lovely energy he brought. And then the more he talked, the more I thought, Ryan, do this somewhere else.
So Liz,
So-
before you continue, are you in support or
I
against?
am against it. It was with great concern that I learned that the acreage directly east of my residence was being considered for a commercial development. When I first noticed the for sale commercial land sign, I gave Cameron Mills a call, and he assured me that the property would only be used for single-family dwelling. Shortly afterwards, Brian, with this great energy, approached my husband and myself to let us know he had purchased the property and he had plans for building an office for 6 to 8 staff members. In later conversations and visits with Brian, he included a community garden with dozen, possibly 100 plus lots. It's hard to tell on the map just how many lots that's going to be, which may involve high school students. A barbecue area for his staff and families, social gatherings about 4 times a year. A further expansion by purchasing the land to the east of him, which is owned by the town. He stated he would offer an easement to the town for pedestrian crossing for high school students crossing at the Highway 3 railroad corridor. A wedding venue was subsequently mentioned by Cameron Mills' presentation to the council. It's appearing to me that there's been a lot of discussion between the Cascos and the town planning, and I just keep hearing different things every time. I'm concerned how these plans will radically change that property and ruin our acreage neighborhood. Instead of a quiet residential use we should expect and be entitled to, our subdivision will become a busy, high-use, commercial, recreation, and business property. This is not acceptable to me. While this hearing is more about rezoning to a direct control only, I feel that the action would result in the following problems. An unacceptable traffic volume, potentially in the hundreds of vehicles visits per week, even possibly thousands over the period of a month during summer, peak summer use, the garden, the wedding, the staff barbecues. Trespassing and vandalism will be attracted to the site and spill over into neighboring properties like mine. This is already a well-documented problem experienced in the community garden that's currently running. Residential property values will plummet, especially mine, being directly beside and sharing a driveway approach. I can't help feel that this direct control is a strategy being taken to pave the way or soft pedal a completely incompatible commercial use that won't normally be approved by a municipal planning commission. The Casco family has been very generous and donated to numerous town Coldell causes and projects in hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've worked as a fundraiser, and you're the guy that I'd be running after all the time. But Coldell residents have already asked me, will the developer, the Casco family, receive special favorable treatment and consideration because of that past generosity? Accordingly, is the town of Coldell in conflict of interest to decide on this rezoning request by the developer because they have received such large financial contributions from the Casco family? There may be an inherent feeling of indebted pressure, which may be difficult and awkward for council members when voting on this proposal. I know I would feel that way if I were in your position. The case exemplifies what rezoning regulations and classifications are designed for. One reason is to protect residents from incompatible, adjacent, nearby land use or development. A commercial development should not be considered for the middle of our residential area any more than it would be in the middle of Cottonwood or the Eastview subdivision. To the credit of Casco's, I would agree this land is greatly a great possibility for their proposal, which I really love, but the transition from acreage residential to commercial use should not be imposed too quickly and forcefully. Sadly, I understand in future years our acreage area could possibly be subdivided for more dense urban housing, but these transitions should be well planned, gradual, and compatible with the adjacent land. If this proposal is approved, you will be allowing a future busy commercial operation or any development future councils accept. into a residential neighborhood, dividing the acreages and causing a severe and significant impact which will be negative to the area. I would like to emphasize my profound appreciation for the Casco family for their generosity supporting our community. Unfortunately, I do not feel their philanthropy should influence approving a problem-filled, incompatible rezoning and development request in their favor. I hope the council and the Cascos will not take offense to any of these concerns and consider them with an open-minded, sympathetic fashion. I am totally confident that this council will follow through on their campaign promises that public input and consultation, and not developers, would have the greatest influence on town planning and decision-making. Also, that public consultation and input would be a major influence for town planning, moving forward together with residents in response to new development requests. Based on all the aforementioned concerns, I feel any consideration enabling rezoning that would allow any type of commercial use should not be approved. For over 45 years, this subdivision has served as a residential community. I can't see any reason why that should change anytime soon. I'm asking you not to run me out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So I'll speak first to your comments about whether or not the generosity of the Casco family will influence council. Like we all sign off on a code of conduct where we will not do that under good conscience. So I just wanted to clear that up. And I'll open it up to Cameron first. Do you have any comments you want to make on that?
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I would address the question of discussion that Ms. Allen and I would have had previously when the realtor was listing the property. The question at the time was whether or not the property had been zoned for commercial use, and it is not. It remains zoned urban reserve. It remains zoned urban reserve. What is allowed within an urban reserve zoning is exactly what is allowed within an urban reserve zoning, which is to say a very limited variety of structures, basically a house and some farming type uses. The same zoning is applied to Ms. Allen's property. That does not mean that I have special authority in my role as an employee of the town to guarantee that a zoning remains in place permanently or that a rezoning application can be received. In my capacity as the Director of Growth and Investment, it is part of my job to meet with people like Mr. Casco who are interested in investing in the community and doing this type of thing. And it is in fact through those discussions where we indicated that if development were to go forward, that rezoning would first be required and that we need to have a public hearing and all sorts of other consultation. And it was also at that meeting with Mr. Casco that we indicated our preference administratively to go forward with the direct control route, therefore giving council the ability to have a really clear handle on exactly what is being proposed and to limit any change of scope of the project and make sure that council is going to be comfortable with exactly what is being built there and to do so in full view of the public. And Mr. Casco agreed to the entire process. He could have applied for any other type of zoning. He simply agreed that direct control seemed like the best fit for this type of conversation, and so here we are this evening.
Okay, thank you. And Ryan, do you have anything to say?
Maybe just to appreciate Liz's comments. No, not at all. No, I totally understand the position of neighbors. I knocked on everyone's door, and I didn't talk to everyone, but I talked to a lot of people on that stretch, and I can appreciate where they come from. And I do want to just say, as far as any contributions that my family's made to the town, I've only highlighted that in my opening because I want to show that we do want what's best for Coaldale, and we've always tried to support Coaldale. I'm not looking for any special favors. If the town of Coaldale doesn't think that this project fits for their community, we will not do it. We will cancel our plan and we'll build an office in Lethbridge County. I think that would be unfortunate for the town and the community members, but other than that, I'm looking forward to
And I wasn't trying to attack, like I say, I've been in fundraising, and it's perception that the community has when somebody gets what they perceive favored.
I understand.
Okay, thanks,
And
Liz.
part of me feels you deserve it.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to make a presentation this evening? Dwayne, if you want to stand up and state your name, address, and speak up, please.
I'm Dwayne Sturm, and I live in those acreages over there also.
What's your address?
Box 1114, Quebec. This is for Cameron. Cameron, you said that the application will not change the taxation base?
So it won't change your taxation.
No.
His will go up.
His will go
Yours
to
won't be
town
affected.
tax.
Sorry. Yeah. yours are
Oh, I know
arbitrary.
mine won't go up.
No,
I
no.
got 25 years.
Yeah.
Ryan's will change to town
They
taxes.
will. Yeah.
Okay, because I was wondering, because I know, do you also propose to put water and sewer to that property?
So the way the permit is drawn up is that we're going to have an engineer look at what's there and what's compatible. And with regardless of what's designed, where municipal services are available, Mr. Casco is going to connect to those. And where they're not available, the system's going to be designed for a future connection to make sure that it's compatible.
Yeah, because there's no sewer there.
No sewer there yet.
There's water across the road,
Correct. Yeah.
but because that was one of the triggering factors, that's why I asked. If you connect to a service, that's a triggering factor.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like to ask Brian.
1 second, Liz.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I can leave that.
No, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
The purpose of this public hearing, Liz, is you have one chance. Yes. Go ahead.
My name is Mike Gudostic. I live along the acreages there. As most of you know, I grew up around here and I've been long-term resident.
And are you for or against the presentation or the
I
application?
am not in favor of the presentation. One of the things that was spoken on earlier was considering the existing use. In my personal opinion, what we have there is primarily a residential area. The landowners there bought into the area and have built their homes there as an acreage development, as an acreage area. As much as I respect the Cascos and their very great contribution to our community, and I'm sure that their development would be a lovely development. There's no, once the cat's out of the bag here and once this property has been rezoned, there's no guarantee that this will always remain in the property of the Cascos for the next 100 years. I don't see any guarantee that the community garden is going to continue on for any certain length of time. It's a beautiful feature of the development, but is it going to be there 20 years from now? Will the property be sold 20 years from now? Once it's in direct development and it has a commercial building on it, who's to say what will happen? The approval process is one time, the building goes ahead. What happens 5 years down the road? We can't back this up and turn it back into a residential very easily. But it's basically a residential property. It would be my preference to continue on residential development there. I would prefer the entire place, the entire area be zoned residential. If I were to have a choice, had a say as a taxpayer, a resident of Coaldale, here we are in the consultation process, and I know that the council prides itself in consulting with the community. I feel like this is our chance. Once the decision's made here tonight, the community consultations are likely to be done. I think most of my other concerns have been addressed by Liz. As much as I respect the Casco family, I'm just not sure that I want an office building next door to me. And I'm not sure, where you folks live, how would you feel if someone built an office building beside your home? Thank you.
Thank you. And before I open it up to Cameron to answer that question about what happens if Casco's want to sell it in 5 years, Dwayne, I forgot to ask you, are you for or against?
I'm against.
Against the application. Thank
Sorry,
you.
John.
Cameron, you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Yeah, the question of who an owner of a property is always a question, right? That's the same question that we could ask of any residential user. When we look at it from this perspective, we would take Mr. Casco out of the equation, quite frankly, which is, Mr. Casco, I think, has demonstrated his desire to be a good neighbor and everything else like that. But from our perspective, yes, that's correct. It could be Mr. Casco's operation in here 10 years from now, or it could be anyone else. What we're looking at is to say we have an office building of a certain size, a certain form, of a certain function, within a broader range of applicable uses, potential uses for these types of areas, and whether or not we feel that presents a long-term detrimental impact to the area. When I look at this particular lot within the function of the other lots in the area, even if we see a primarily residential use in the long term for this area, it is not difficult to imagine how a single 1 to 2 acre piece of what is currently commercial development might function within that space, particularly given the direct access to 18th Avenue and the rest of that. It's no different than if a house is built with a certain user in mind, and then it's sold to someone who decides to rent it out to teenagers, to college students. The town doesn't have regulations forbidding certain types of people from owning property. So that's simply not something that we can address with this application or any application for any reason whatsoever. That being said, when we look at this, Mr. Casco's business is very well established. I do not anticipate it going anywhere in the near term, so I think it's a pretty reasonable bet that Casco's cattle operation will be here in 10 years and 20 years and so on and so forth moving forward. But on the broader question of what if it changes at some point in the future, again, we have no ability to address that for any property in town for any reason.
Okay, thank you. Ross, Roberta, you have anything to comment on?
Yeah, I will.
If I can just get you to state
Named
your
Ross
name.
Taylor, and my wife and I live 2 lots to the east on 6 acres. The way I look at this whole situation is that the town of Coaldale has irrevocably changed the complexion of our neighborhood forevermore. It's not the quiet, it will not be the quiet residential neighborhood that it's been for 50 years. The commotion that you're going to create with the school, the quarter next to me where the kids are going to walk, you got 80 acres planned of houses over there. That is a major, major issue to us. Being as the town has done that, it does not seem to be reasonable that you can envelop me with development and yet restrict me, maybe in the future, to only be able to entertain residential housing. I have enough land that we own, we didn't know this was coming, but we have it, to restrict me forevermore, or for the foreseeable future, with a residential only development, which is what the existing thing is. It's just not reasonable. I didn't create this situation, the town of Coaldale created this situation. That's the way I see it, so it's just not reasonable to me to curtail the possibilities, whatever they might be, of my property for the future, because 50 years ago, it was deemed or zoned by the county at that time to be residential. The game has changed, and the town of Coaldale changed it. We were happy. Everybody here, I think, was quite happy. Those days are done. It wasn't our choice, it was your choice. So I think you should think about, having done that to us, what options have you left, or what options will you leave us? And that's my position on that. I understand what Liz says. We were happy there. This is something out of the blue. It just changed our lifestyle. It will continue to change it. It'll never be the way it was. And you people should think about that. You put us in this position. So I have no objection to what Mr. Casco's planned. I think in the future there'll be a natural, normal, reasonable expectation of other things on those properties. Let's get on with it. You know, just pushing it aside as a residential,
I found this on the web.
it's not reasonable under what has happened. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Russ. So, just for clarification, Cameron, if you could maybe speak to if one of the other landowners want to do something in the future before we get that area structure plan, what the process will be.
Thank you. So, again, it's up to an individual applicant to decide what it is they want to do, and they're welcome to apply for anything. So, for example, Mr. Casco could have applied for a heavy industrial type zoning, and I would have reluctantly taken his money and set up a public hearing. But my recommendation at that particular hearing would have been for council to say no. That being said, my recommendation as a member of the administrative team, for anyone that wants to develop these parcels prior to a more comprehensive plan in place, would be the same as was my advice to Mr. Casco, which is to say that until a more comprehensive plan's in place, the only appropriate way, in my view, to develop these lots is to do so through the direct control process, thereby granting council and the public the ability to see plans and to determine the extent of those plans and the impact of those plans, the suitability of those plans, prior to any sort of approval that would have otherwise come administratively by way of the ordinance that was run. That's a long answer to a question where I would say my recommendation, until we have an area structure plan in place, to go through the same process as Mr. Casco and go through direct control zone.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up to council now for last chance at questions for either the applicant or for Cameron. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and future Liz had mentioned that there may be some wedding venues taking place on that property and possible barbecues and whatnot. I'm just wondering how often you plan on doing things like that, if you are going to rent it out to people having a wedding venue there, and just how busy are we looking at this place getting over the summer months? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. I think when we had talked before, we said that we think there's a beautiful property that if people wanted to get their wedding pictures taken on the property, we would be interested in allowing that. I think the talk of having barbecues with our staff or something like that maybe came up when I talked to Liz, and yeah, we have one barbecue a year, but as I said, we have occasional live tours coming. Maybe we have four groups tour our farm in a year, and potentially we would have a barbecue. But I want to reiterate that it's not a high traffic thing that we're proposing here. As far as a wedding venue goes, we had talked about we understand that the property next to this is owned by the town, and we'd inquired to whether that would be for sale. And I think maybe that's a separate issue. We don't know. We have no intention of holding wedding ceremonies on that property at this point. It's not in the cards. We've presented our proposal based exactly what we talked about today. Access for the public, for gardens. I guess, yes, we would consider allowing people to get their wedding pictures taken there, but we're not thinking that this is a high volume summer property.
Okay.
And maybe I should also say like that there are a lot of garden boxes drawn on this. Maybe you've counted 100. That's not what our intention is, Liz. It's as demanded by the town. I don't know if there's 12 or 15 over by the hub. If there's that many, we would do that many. If people want to do more, we would look at doing more. But we don't think that there would be any need to have 100 different plots for gardens there.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from council? Council Beekman.
Thanks, Mayor. I could just ask the gallery for a little clarification. Liz, Dwayne, Mike, and Ross. We're kind of dealing with two different entities here. Do you object to the rezoning to direct control, or are you objecting to the development? Dwayne?
I'm objecting to both, actually.
Okay.
I don't want the thing changed to direct control, and I don't want the development.
Okay.
I would like it to stay residential.
I would just once again caution, it's, I think the two things go hand in hand. Once the zoning has changed to direct control, once the approval for this project goes ahead, where does it go from there? The place gets built. There's no promise that there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 weddings a year. But if there's 10, is the town going to pull the permit? Well, of course not. If there's 5 garden boxes and there's 5 cars that come and go in a year, or if there's 150 like the drawing shows and there's 150 cars come and go out of there. Well, we don't know, and it's beyond our control now. So the discussion here is one thing, but once the project is green lighted, what happens? Or maybe 3 years from now, the garden boxes aren't well used and aren't supported and they disappear. So to approve the project because of the garden boxes and how they might improve the community is maybe speculative. Is there an obligation that they be an ongoing thing? Who knows what will happen to that in 5 years?
Okay, thank you.
Both? One or the
I
other?
agree. I am against. I'm uncomfortable with the direct control because it depends on which council is in, and the council, you guys can have all these great intentions, but the next group may say, well, that was wrong, and change stuff. As much as I love what Ryan is trying to create there, and I feel he could, it's commercial, period. We don't want commercial. I like it to be zoned residential. Period.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Chapman, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And more technical questions for Cam, if I may. Number one, with regards to the building itself, the building schematics or architectural drawings, I guess, portray it as a building that's kind of conforms with the rest of the neighborhood. It doesn't stand out as a real big, office building with big commercial signs and, that sort of a setting. I suspect that that's going to be the case. The second point would be the business license component, and there would be a requirement for a business license once the development is approved and they become I guess taxpayers in the town of Coaldale.
Correct.
Okay. The third thing would be a direct control review. In times past, councils had the pleasure, I guess is the word, to have a review from time to time, whether it be after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years. So I would assume that could be the case moving forward.
Thank you for the question. Certainly it would be possible. I want to make it very, very clear that if we approve development permit for an office and 2 years from now decide to rezone the property from direct control to something else, the office will be there and has been approved, so that won't change, just like the existing acreage owners are welcome to continue to use their parcel as acreages for for as long as they see fit. Once something's established, we're not in the sort of the business of making things change. We're simply in the business of potentially accommodating those types of applications. I would think that as part of the area structure plan process, with the lot in question zoned to direct control in the medium term, the likelihood of the future zoning within the area would be established through that process. And so if this zoning were applied, we can incorporate that into the planning process and ensure that the area structure plan process provides us with the tools necessary to make this particular use fit within the broader area in such a way that it doesn't necessarily have to. It might conform to a new zoning, for example, that's very specific to the area.
So I guess that application would have to come to council, because I think, just from what I'm hearing from our presenters tonight, is their concerns about the future. And so as long as this direct control stays within the authority of the town council, then in perpetuity, it's there would be, it would be up to the council to offer any changes as they occur. So I would suppose, I would hope that would kind of give some comfort to the fact that direct control has its merits too. The fourth thing, or the fifth thing I have here, is conditions in the development permit. I guess that'd be one of the things that I would be concerned to make sure that those 16 conditions are abided by. If there's no concern with that, that'd be up to the development permit office, I suppose. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have no reason to believe that Mr. Casco won't abide by the conditions listed here. And again, 16 conditions is a significant number by any stretch for a proposal, but doing so and having those conditions attached to the permit ensures that the building is built and meets the various needs associated with the building.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. So Casco Cattle owning this land could have come to the town and said, I want to put in multifamily housing because I'm a philanthropist and I want to make it low rent. That could have happened, correct? After they bought the land. And so it's zoned residential. And then what's the control of stopping them from doing that? So we've got to look at the positive of this office building compared to what could be in there as a residential facility in these lots.
Urban Reserve.
To speak to the issue, under the current zoning, it is urban reserve.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, the community garden and the greenhouse could be approved. He could have applied for those separately. I would have simply approved them because the bylaw does not provide for the ability not to. The office is really the triggering issue. Under the existing zoning, some use, like a day home, for example. So a day home for childcare is a permitted use under the existing zoning. So that would be approved as a matter of course. Discretionary uses would include farm buildings, bed and breakfast, agricultural service operation, horticulturalist, garden center, which is sort of the retail sale of garden implements directly to the consumer, outdoor recreation and sports fields, recreational vehicle storage. So there are any number of, I won't list them all, but there are any number under the existing zone. If a residential type zoning were applied, then any of the uses within those. So even within R1A, which is sort of what I might call the standard, so Cottonwood zoning or Westgate zoning, there's any number of permutations and combinations of mostly residential type uses that are allowed within that district.
Okay, thank you. Last time around the table, any questions?
Hi.
Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Due to Ryan. My question is, would you be willing to, make any sort of changes to help these residents feel more comfortable? Like, for example, at the first reading, we were told there would be 6 to 8 staff per day at work. now at this potential second reading, we're hearing up to 10 staff members. So just as like an idea, is there any way you would work with them to say, okay, only this amount per day? And is there any leeway for any kind of like...
Well, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. I'm done. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for the question. I have 6 people that work in my office full time right now. We have managers coming from other locations for meetings. So I think we've got 10 office spaces in this building. We will have other people coming to meetings. We have a boardroom there. My family meets quarterly for meetings. I have meetings with other people. So I will not promise that we won't at times have more than that, but it is a very low number, like 20 to 30 people per week would be in our office.
But like overall, you would try your best to sort of keep it to a bare minimum so that the residents in the area
Well, maybe just to say, I'm surprised at the pushback I'm getting at like the community garden, even though people like the idea, there will be more traffic from it. I would be happy just to build my office there and not allow any public access. I think that would be unfortunate for what we're trying to do here, but I'm looking at my options here. I own this property right now. If we don't go through with this and I'm not allowed to build an office, I'm going to sell it. And if it's deemed strictly residential for forever, the value of that has gone down. And I know I'm going to take heat from my family because we've lost money on this deal. And I think that the residents, although I appreciate their concerns, there is a limit on the value of those properties. To buy a 5-acre parcel in the middle of a town, as a developer, it's hard to get the value out of it. So we aren't necessarily thinking of this project as value for our business, but we really did think it was value for the community. And so it's hard for me to say that we're going to restrict that public access piece to this without, fundamentally changing what we're trying to do here. But at the end of the day, if the community is against any type of public access, we would like to build an office on our property, and that would be fine with us.
Cameron,
if I may. So when we look at these types of applications administratively, we're looking at the size of the office building. We don't have the resources as a town to count the number of employees. I have no idea how many people work in the office next door, for example. We have an application. His existing component is 6 to 8. There is the capacity within the scope of the existing building footprint for him to expand his operation just as anyone would have that right within the town without asking for my permission or the permission of the town. What we have included here is to say that we don't view an office building of this size in terms of its projected impact on things like noise or hours of operation or traffic as being significantly different than what is typical for a residential type use. Like I mentioned, it's substantially lower than a 5,000 square foot restaurant would be. Right? So that's our perspective on it. We have included a condition to say that if we really have no idea what the uptake on the community garden will be, for example, or how many people will come and when they will come, we want to make sure that we have a condition in place that says if there's parking issues, if parking starts to spill off the property, then we have the ability to require the construction of additional parking on site to make sure that that doesn't become a nuisance to the neighbors. But other than that, our perspective is the office size is what we're interested in confirming today, and then after that, he's free to operate his business.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Pickering.
So thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So just to clarify this, the town owns a lot beside her. It's zoned what? Residential right
Urban
now?
Reserve.
Urban Reserve. And then we have 2 lots over as Sturms. And then the one that's on the corner of the triangle lot, that is zoned commercial?
Urban Reserve.
Urban Reserve.
The far
So
east one is commercial. The far east triangle piece is commercial.
Direct control.
Direct control, sorry, direct control.
Direct control.
Yes.
And that is where it's been issued. What is there right now?
Kevin can speak to that.
Oh, please.
So a permit has been issued for construction of an office type structure on that lot. Construction hasn't begun.
Okay. Thank you.
I will now ask council if they have sufficient information to make a decision on land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22, rezoning urban reserve to direct control. Does everybody have enough information? With that being said, I'll close the public hearing at 6:45 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, council.
Moving on to,
Come on, Baldy.
What's that?
I said, come on, Baldy. Didn't go home yet.
is Kevin here? Should we finish that?
He is here.
You want to call him in? Okay, we're going to go back to agenda item 9.1, the Coaldale and District Emergency Services Quarter 3 report. We have our Director of Protective Services and Deputy CAO, Kevin McEwen, is going to be presenting. And then we'll finish up with Mark Anderson with his presentation as well. So if you want to join Kevin up there, you can.
Okay.
Okay. Mark, if you can just pull that door closed for me, please. Welcome, Kevin.
Good evening.
So whenever you're settled in, the floor is yours. Actually, while you're getting ready, let's finish up with Mark if you want to do that. Mark, is that okay?
Yep, my presentation was complete,
Yes,
but I'm happy to answer
I just
more
wanted
questions.
to talk a little bit more about those Jake breaks.
Yeah.
So getting lots of complaints from the Cottonwood community regarding the Jake breaks, and is there some way that we can be more proactive? And I know it has to be witnessed, or you have to have someone that's willing to go to court. Is there something that we can do?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. We have actually purchased a decibel meter, which I've recently acquired, so that we actually can start to get some noise readings on it, so we can develop evidence independent of a resident saying that it offends me. I'll be coming back to council later with some suggestions as to setting a decibel level, so that we can actually have a measurable way. In addition to citizen making a complaint, we'll have a measurable way to say this is too loud, and we'll be able to use that as evidence for successful prosecutions.
So my understanding is a Jake break is a Jake break. So someone puts that thing on coming into Coaldale, isn't he in violation?
He is. What I want to be able to do, though, is for my guys to have that measurable size difference. So if an operator were to say, well, I wasn't using my Jake brake, I just geared down, or I used my transmission to slow down, it makes more noise then. By actually having that along with a measurable or a definable noise level, whether he says I used my Jake brake or I used a transmission, we still have the ability to lay a successful complaint.
But there's a distinct difference between the two.
There is a distinct difference between the two. And I would hesitate to go to court myself, even though I did have a Class 1 driver's license at one point in my career. I would hesitate myself to go into court and say, well, I can definitely say that he turned on his Jake brake and he didn't gear down.
You would hesitate because?
Because depending on the configuration of his exhaust system and everything else, it's going to make a lot of noise when you gear a truck down. Having driven a diesel for a number of years, I can make a lot more noise by shifting my gears down. For me to say from one noise level to the other when they're both coming out of the exhaust, I just think it would make for more successful prosecutions if we can actually define the noise level along with it. And to that end, that's why we've got the decibel leader, and we have been visiting some of our local trucking establishments to get some noise meter levels on vehicles and educating ourselves more to make sure that we can do it properly.
Okay, so it's important that we're proactive on that then.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And just speaking to that point too, obviously, as Councillor Beekman would know, is that there's customized exhaust systems that without Jake brakes can make a certain level of noise just by themselves. So regardless of what you're doing to shift down or shifting up, even it's, leaving town, it can make just as much or more noise. So my question to you would be, just in follow-up of Mayor Van Rijn's comments, is where are our Jake brake signs located? Are they on the very outskirts of town? So
at the moment, our Jake brake notification signs are mounted on 845 at the south end, where the Alberta Transportation sign warning against Jake brake is posted, which is right at the town limits. We had asked about moving the signs, but at this time, Alberta Transportation is not prepared to move forward with that, is my understanding. So they're right at the town limits.
just to that, then, if we're hearing from concerned citizens in Cottonwood, I mean, those signs are way further south, so you would think that a person would be applying would be abiding by the law by then at the outskirts of town and not by the canal.
That's correct. We do have an issue at the canal that we have placed people out on when we can to listen for Jake brakes when they're hitting them at the canal. Actually, the signs are posted right at the town limits, which are just south of Cottonwood Drive. And there's a property right at the south end on the east side of 845. It's a 2.6 acre lot there, and the signs are posted adjacent to that property. Even though on the west side of 845, the town limits extend quite a bit farther south, on the east side of 845, our town limits jog quite a bit farther north, which brings that signage much closer to Cottonwood.
Thank you. And then my last question is and I'm not sure of that avenue that runs south of Kate Andrews, 23rd.
23rd Avenue, yes.
So again, lots of complaints on that one for people exceeding the speed limit. So can you explain with your new, first of all, is radar allowed on that avenue?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then also you guys have handheld speed guns now as well?
Yes, we do.
And where do you use those?
They use them on 23rd Avenue, Cottonwood Drive. They've been used quite often along 22nd Avenue near both R.I. Baker and Jenny Emery. And also they do stop sign enforcement there as well. We've had a number of complaints there. And on 20th Street.
Okay, thank you. And then go ahead.
I'm sorry. Do we have any spare CPO vehicles?
No.
Okay. That takes away. I was going to say, if we had we're talking about deterrence and whatnot, having just a plant vehicle might be one that just kind of gets relocated on the daily.
It was tried in another jurisdiction that I worked.
Yeah.
And we ended up having more vandalism to the plant vehicle than we had success.
Okay, then never mind. I take that one back.
Then my last comment before we turn it over to Kevin is, I believe you received the same phone call that I did regarding parents parking on the crosswalks at the schools to drop their kids off.
Yes, it did.
And is that being looked into then?
It is. I've spoken to that citizen, and we've discussed a proposal, And our school resource officer, Deb Nielsen, is returning from course on Wednesday this week. And we've made plans to meet with the citizen, and we're going to discuss a long-term plan for that, not just for Jenny Emmerich, but for other schools as well.
And then as far as safety patrols, they don't do those anymore at the schools?
There are no safety patrols at our schools at this time.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to address that too at Jenny Emery and the parking lot on the east side. There's a sign that says no left turns. When you're coming out of that parking lot, you have to go right. I've noticed that numerous parents pulling out of that parking lot go left, and it says no exit to the left. If you've been addressing that, because that seems to be an ongoing daily thing there.
That is not something I was aware of. It's the first time hearing of it, but I can certainly put it on our list of enforcement actions.
Because they go down, they know they can't, if they go right, they have to go down and they have to flip a U-turn. So what they're doing is they come out of that parking lot, turn left, and then what happens is they block everybody on that crosswalk. So,
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Mark? Okay, thank you, Mark. Kevin, it's all yours.
Sorry, just a follow-up question there for the deputy mayor, if you don't mind on that one. Is that just no left turns during school pickup and drop off?
I don't think so. I think it's all the time because you're impeding that crosswalk right there.
So obviously that would be the critical time would be drop
School
off,
time,
obviously, and leaving. And,
It's on Avenue or the street?
It's on 11th Street. They come off of the parking lot that was put there now, like they park on the east side. So they park and then they go out by the portables and they turn left. And there's a sign that says no left turn there.
Yeah, no one wants to go right. So
No one wants to go right because there's no through street.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'll do my portion of the report now, and thank you very much, Mark. If you want to sit through, that's great.
I'll sit through it.
All right, so just the Q3 report and some stats year to date that I'll take you through here tonight. So looking at this graph, just our call volume for the last kind of 5 years. So this is updated to the end of September of this year, 487 calls. So just about already matched our medical calls as compared to 2021. And we're forecasting to potentially hit 600 calls this year. If we were to maintain our monthly average that we've seen in 2022, we'd be at 648. So bets are on right now at the fire hall. So these are just calls by month, with the blue graphs being 2022 calls. So yeah, we're averaging 54 calls this year per month to the end of September, so quite a bit higher than last year. September was the first month of this year that we had less calls. So did slow down a little bit, which is all right. And November's been a little bit lower. I don't have those numbers quite yet, but we will be ending the year pretty strong, I think, and pretty close to that number, 600. Comparison of calls in the town of Coaldale compared to Lethbridge County, and other would be mutual aid calls in other jurisdictions. Primarily, most of our calls, 71%, are happening in town. But again, a large majority of those being medical in nature, and 133 out in Lethbridge County. There's a breakdown of those 345 calls that are occurring in the town of Coaldale, 250 medical, 66% of our calls, and 95 fire calls to date. And consistently about the exact opposite in Lethbridge County, 31% medical calls, 46 to the end of September, and 69% or 96 calls in fire. Overall, 61% of our calls so far this year have been medical, The next highest would be alarms. And we don't, for this, we don't break it down into what was actually just a false alarm or what was a real incident. So 15% looks like a lot of alarms, but keep in mind some of those are actual events where there was carbon monoxide in a house or we ventilated or there was an actual fire. So we don't actually break those out. 7% fires, down from 2021 quite significantly. MDCs 12%, and other calls, fire investigations, public assists, and mutual aid would be the 2 and 3% there. Time on calls, green is Coaldale, blue is Lethbridge County. 122.5 hours time spent on calls in the town of Coaldale, 95 just over in Lethbridge County. Firefighter hours is based on how many firefighters we had on scene per how many hours we spent on the call itself. So quite a bit more, well, 10% more right now to the end of September in town, and 45% of our firefighter time out in Lethbridge County. Total firefighter incidents, firefighter hours, 1,678. The code red graph continues to go up this year quite significantly. So we're at 65, and this was to the end of September, so there's definitely been a few more since then. And we won't know if any of the EMS changes are helping with that gold red number until likely first quarter of next year, once both ambulances are on 12-hour shifts. So as of now, only one ambulance in Coaldale has gone to the 12-hour shifts. So they're fully assembled 24 hours a day. And the other ambulance is still on the core flex. So we're still having some issues with that one ambulance timing out and being shut down and leaving Coaldale with just the one ambulance in town.
Do you know what the staff prefer? Do they like the 12-hour or do they like the core flex?
The staff prefer the 12-hour shifts. The core flex, they're basically stuck on that shift for 96 hours straight. So it's very difficult to have a life outside of work for those 4 days in a row. So they do prefer the 12-hour shifts. I have heard some complaints, I guess, that they're not quite set up for the staff yet to be on 12-hour shifts. They don't have a proper facility. They're just working out of that garage at the hospital, and they don't really have a designated area at the hospital for EMS staff. So they do have some challenges there. So, you know, I've talked to a few of the staff, and they're really excited with the potential solution of coming to the fire hall where we have an appropriate facility for them to report to work, to sit down, to eat lunch, to go to the bathroom, you know, to have a quiet room somewhere to do their paperwork. They don't feel like they have a home at the hospital, especially since the ambulatory care center is getting busy as well. The small office they did have in there sounds like the hospital wants to move them out to make more room for urgent care. So some of the feedback I have got from staff that I've talked to so far. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Fire prevention and public education, these numbers are not total year to date. This is strictly in the last quarter. 47 fire inspections in town, 24 in Lethbridge County. 4 fires were investigated in Lethbridge County, a couple of home safety inspections with smoke alarm replacements, 5 bird permits, that's strictly in town in the annexed area. And we had Fire Prevention Week in October. First time in 3 years we were able to have the full open house and have the community come in and get some exposure to the fire hall and some public education, so that was really great. We had at least over 100 people come through the night there with a community barbecue and a vehicle education demonstration. We also partnered up with FCSS and Alberta Health Services to offer a car seat clinic at the fire hall that night as well too. So it was great. Had lots of kindergarten classes come through the fire hall again this year, so it was great to see those kids back in the hall and getting tours and getting educated on fire prevention. Oops, wrong computer. Training in the emergency management discipline. We did have a Lethbridge County functional exercise, which Deputy Chief Clayton Ruppert led. So that was Lethbridge County ran exercise involving a wildfire. Lots of different agencies involved that joined at the county for that. Coaldale did play a part. Our emergency social services branch set up the reception center in a functional capacity and had volunteers come through. We had actual food for people to feed them, simulate that they were evacuees from the city of Lethbridge or town of Goldhurst. So that went really well. We had 2 provincial ESS or provincial emergency social services people from the province come down and help with that as well too. And we have some ICS training. Actually, that's starting tomorrow. DC Ruppert's doing ICS 200 training for some town staff and county staff, and then ICS 100 later this week. Fire training wise, we hosted standard first aid training and CPR training for town staff and Coaldale RCMP members, municipal staff and uniformed officers came through that. So we did that, 2 classes ran. We had 1 firefighter from Coaldale complete their safety codes officer group A, which is the basic fire safety codes officer course, and we have 2 others that have since completed. We did a large joint training exercise with Picture View Emergency Services, simulating a rope rescue, a low slope rescue down in the coulees with some of our rescue trained members. 3 new firefighters completed Recruit Academy just recently, and they're now responding to calls. Our lesson plans for the 3rd quarter focused more so on the rescue aspects of what we could respond to, some open water rescue, some boat operations, low slope rescue, ladder truck, and multi-story fire operations. So the way we kind of do our training now with our fire training officer is have themes for the month throughout the year, and we kind of start off at the start of the month building on the basic skills, reviewing, and then the training gets more and more complex as we go out through the month. So it's been working out very well. Looking ahead to the last quarter of this year and early next, the fire department master plan that's being completed by Bayer Integrated Solutions is in the final phase right now. So they are reviewing all of our feedback and finalizing that plan. They are slated to present to council on December 12th with some representatives from Bayer here in attendance to go through the fire master plan. Our records management system, we are again leaving a few different systems and kind of amalgamating everything into one solution called First Due. So we've been transitioning to that system since June, and we're getting very close. So hopefully by the end of the year, we're fully on board with that. Lethbridge County agreement. Recently had approval on the newly expanded territory and some additional authorities for our staff to do fire inspections in Lethbridge County. So our next step with that, we haven't formally signed the agreement yet. We do need to review the draft, which is in Lethbridge County's hands right now. And we need to sit down with Lethbridge County and the city of Lethbridge to iron out how mutual aid is going to work, should we need them for any fire calls in that area. HSEMS, I kind of touched on this, but we're definitely need to keep an eye on and observe any effects that the changes that HSEMS is doing to Coaldale EMS, and keep an eye on the code reds and how often we're being called out for that. So that second ambulance is scheduled to go to the 12-hour shifts early in January. We have been in contact with Alberta Health Services EMS facilities. So I'm talking to a fellow up in Edmonton right now. He has all the information he needs, just waiting to assign the case to one of his workers. So just waiting to hear back on that. Okay. And that was it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
I'll open it up to council. Any questions for Kevin?
Just a quick question, Mayor. On the records management system, this first 2 RMS, that's the one that's being addressed for budget. Is that?
No, actually, our first due system is not coming to budget. We're able to, with the savings from getting out of the other programs, we don't need any new money to transfer that. The RMS software that was coming to budget is actually in Mark's department for municipal enforcement, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, could I get someone to sponsor a motion that council receive the COLA and the District Emergency Services Q3 report as information? Councillor Saylor, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Congratulations on your 15-year award, Chief.
Oh, thank you very much.
Deserved. Thank you, Mark. And then you want to give us a quick update of what's going on December 3rd?
December the 3rd, we have our Candy Cane check stop planned. So on Highway 845 and roughly 2100 block in the playground zone, our community peace officers, along with the RCMP, along with some visiting community police officers from the surrounding communities and MAD, are going to be having an awareness check stop where anybody coming through will get information about impaired driving and keeping safe over the Christmas season. There'll also be candy canes and some other things there for kids if they're along with their parents, and it's really intended to be an information and awareness check stop, more so than we hope we don't find anybody who's been drinking and driving. But the RCMP will be there should that eventual thing happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody coming through 2 or 3 times.
Yes, last year we had a number of people who came through a number of times.
Okay, we're going to back up now to agenda item 7.2, the land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22. And we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Given that I had plenty of opportunity to speak during the public hearing, I won't say much at this point. Other than provide council with another opportunity to ask any questions they might have about the bylaw prior to presenting it to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to make note to our municipal clerk that we do a recorded vote for this, please. Any questions for Cameron? Okay, so then, no questions. Our options are to approve the bylaw as written, approve the bylaw subject to amendments, table the matter pending additional information, or defeat the bylaw. So the first motion option that comes up is that I'm looking for a sponsor that council provides second reading. Let me just back up here. I'm on the wrong page here.
Page 40 on my agenda.
Yes, no, I made notes on the wrong one here. So it's agenda item 7.2 that council provides second reading of land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10 2022 as presented. Councillor Avery. Any further discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next motion option that council provide third and final reading of land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22. Someone care to sponsor that one? Councillor Saylor. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Beekman, Councillor Reese, and Mayor Van Rijn. Same for the first reading. Motion is carried. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
We're all over the agenda map here tonight, so I just got to find my way here. And Cameron, we're going to do agenda item 10.1, verbal update on the intermunicipal development plan. And seeing as how you're the resident expert on that, you're going to help me.
That sounds great.
So for our viewers from home, we just had an open house here this past Wednesday, I believe, regarding the IDP plan. So an intermunicipal development plan, or IDP, serves as a planning tool providing guidance to decision makers through agreed upon planning policies that apply to the land within the identified plan area. The IDP contains policies that will be used as a framework for working cooperatively and communicating decision making in each municipality. Each municipality is responsible for making decisions within its own municipal jurisdiction. So as part of that process, myself, Councillor Beekman, and Councillor Avery are on the IDP committee. And we started this discussion in March of 2022, where we met at the Lethbridge County offices in the Coyote Room. And then in June, we did mail-outs to the residents on the fringe of the plan area. And then in June, also county members of county council, town council members I just mentioned, and the planners from Hillary and Melanie were at those meetings as well. And we as councils reviewed that under the direction of the planners, including Cameron Mills, that guided us through that process. And then we just recently had the public open house to present to the affected landowners and for anybody else that just wanted to come and ask questions. And basically, and this is where I need Cameron's help on, is that we are extending the boundary a half a mile on the west and on the north side. On the east side, it's pretty well staying the same. And the reason that we're doing that is so if there's going to be any development on that fringe area, whether it be agriculture, extensive or intensive operations, subdivision of residential uses, industrial and commercial uses, growth areas and annexation, utilities and servicing, transportation and road network. So basically that's for Lethbridge County and the town of Coaldale to discuss anything that's planned in that area. And I use Cameron's example many times. So if somebody on the just on the west side of the fringe area wants to put in a nuclear power plant, then Lethbridge County needs to talk to the town of Coaldale before something like that gets approved. Did I miss anything?
No, that's exactly it. It's really a document that's about ensuring that we treat each municipality treats each other with the proper respect. And it helps us in the long term avoid some of the planning. You see some of the planning challenges we have, for example, with South Coaldale and how carved out is in terms of getting it to that next stage of growth. So having a good IDP in place ensures that it doesn't prevent development within the county. It just makes sure that the county considers what the town's long-term needs are in terms of anything that goes in there, and it just really allows for a much smoother, really long-term process as the town.
So what's the next step now after this open house?
Well, the next step is I need to sit down with Hillary and we need to go over some of our notes, see if there was any, sort of consolidate the general feedback that was received at the meeting. It was a very significantly attended meeting relative to how some of these things go. And then following that, any adjustments or proposed amendments to the plan will be put in place. The group will have an open opportunity to look at those, and then once the group is comfortable with the document, then that document will be presented to both councils for adoption. Whether that's at a joint meeting of councils or 2 separate meetings is up to people that are capable of organizing those things than I am, but I believe it would just be 2 separate meetings.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Just make sure that when you have to do your verbal report, you have the resident expert with you at the same time. Can I get someone to make a motion that we receive the verbal report on the intermunicipal development plan as information? Councillor Reese, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Then we're moving on to information items. Information item 12.1, the Municipal Accountability Program, also referred to as the MAP 2020 report, confirmation of completion. And I'll just open it up to our CAO if he just wants to speak on that for a minute. Sorry, I didn't give you a warning.
Consider myself warned. This letter is receipt from Municipal Affairs indicating that all of the technical items that they noted under the Municipal Accountability Program have been completed. So I just wanted to provide this for council for information to let them know that the process has come full circle and that we were able to identify and respond to all of the gaps in their report to their satisfaction. And this letter basically is the completion stamp of that assignment.
Any questions for Kalen on that?
Motion to receive information.
Yes.
Combine.
No, that one separately, yes. Councillor Chapman, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. And then also in your agenda package under 12.2, the RCMP quarter 2 community policing report. That was part of our information package. Any questions, comments on that one? Is that something that we should get the staff sergeant to come and present on again, or?
If you wish, like the reason I didn't go out of my way to ask him is that there are a number of municipalities in the jurisdiction that he manages, and if he were to go to every council meeting every quarter of all the communities in his area, that would be a lot of evenings for him. So unless council has any specific questions, I thought I would just include this as information, and we can always invite him back if there are questions for him to respond to.
Okay, thank you. Can I get someone to make a motion that council receive the RCMP community policing reports from quarter 2 as information? Councillor Beekman, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So that completes the open portion of the meeting.
It's actually 8.3.
Oh, sorry.
7.1.
Yeah, we did 7.1.
Okay.
We just haven't done it.
8.3.
Oh,
There's a scatter made.
7.1 is complete.
that's complete.
Yeah.
Yes, 8.3, development permit 2022-127 regarding office building, greenhouse, and community garden. Ryan Casco was the applicant, and we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting.
So again, this relates to the public hearing that was just held. So we had previously now adopted the rezoning to zone the parcel from urban reserve to direct control. Given that that has occurred, now we can consider the issuance of the development permit. So not to rehash the discussion from the public hearing, we do include a recommendation of approval of the permit with the as the plan was provided, with the addition of these 16 conditions which are listed in the report. And the administration's recommendation is to approve the application with those 16 conditions.
Any questions for Cameron?
Just one quick question, if I may, Mayor, just through these 16 conditions, those have been worked through with the applicant to their satisfaction and yours?
They have. So the conditions are generated following consultation with the applicant, as well as consultation with our manager of development engineering, who's principally responsible for some of the technical details associated with development. So he's comfortable that the infrastructure requirements associated with development will be addressed in these conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a deadline for completion at all? Or can that be worked into condition?
Certainly. Typically, the development permits have a 1 year.
Okay.
It's not so much completion so much as it's substantial construction or substantial. They have to begin substantial construction with 1 year. If they don't, then the permit is 1 year.
Okay.
Thank you. So before we call for the question on this one, can I get this one recorded as well, please? So our no more questions? So then our decision options are that council may approve the development subject to conditions listed in the report, approve the permit subject to the amended conditions, or deny the application with reasons. So could I get someone to sponsor the motion of their choice? Councillor Avery.
Yes, I'll sponsor that council approve the development permit 2022-127, office building, greenhouse, and community garden with conditions as listed.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Avery, put your hands up, please. Councillor Avery, Deputy Mayor Pickering, Councillor Saylor, and Councillor Chapman. Opposed? Councillor Beekman, Councillor Reese, Mayor Van Rijn. Motion is carried. Thank you. So now that closes the open portion of the meeting. I will require someone to sponsor a motion that council move to go into closed session at 7:27 p.m. in accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, subject to section 17, personal privacy. Who cares to sponsor that motion? Councillor Reese, thank you. And that's at 7:27 p.m. We'll take a 10-minute break, please.